Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Welcome to our Texans Postgame Show. Robert Land, along with my co-host, Sports Radio 610, Shaun Bijani. And if you're new to the party, we have 45 years in journalism between the two of us, over 35 years covering Houston sports. So you're in good hands. And Shaun, the Browns didn't even need Deshaun Watson or their offense. Kyle Allen, responsible for 2 Browns touchdowns, and the special teams gave them 7 more. So there you go.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting, and we'll talk about the vibe in the Texans locker room after this one. A lot of deflecting from the offense, but onto the defense's shoulders to that of the Texans. They felt like they all should have done more. And if the Cleveland Browns can score defensively and on special teams, then why can't we? Their best effort to try and obviously cover up and protect another horrible offensive performance from that of the Houston Texans, which not historically bad today by any stretch, but certainly just about as ineffective and inefficient and careless as we've become, unfortunately, used to seeing.
What was the reaction in the locker room? Anything new or different today?
Nothing new or different, I would say. I just thought, a couple of interesting observations. I will give you that from the usual rigmarole of, deflecting and the yada, yada, yada stuff. But for the first time this season, it was interesting that Cal McNair went into the home locker room, went in, did not see him come out, obviously exited from a different door, along with Lovie Smith, who we didn't see come out as he typically does right in front of us, walking in front of the media. So I thought that was interesting. Frank Ross, the special teams coordinator for the Texans, who, for about a good half of this game, they were probably as good as they've been, playing their best game of the year as a special teams unit in all phases there. Obviously, the Desmond King fumble. They allowed the punt return for a touchdown. But aside from that, it was Cam Johnson who just punted the ball beautifully today. There was good coverage in all aspects, whether it be kickoff, return, punt, return, you name it. They did it up until those really last quarter and a half of football. Frank Ross exited looking pretty intense, pretty pissed off, which I thought was kind of interesting. I have not seen him leave that early. You never know what's going on outside of football, but just kind of interesting. And then let's see, what else did I observe? A lot of people had Deshaun Watson Brown jerseys in the Texans locker room. A lot of the guys getting him signed. I know Jerry Hughes, Obo Caracuo, I think. A handful, about 5, 6, 7 players after the game dapped up Deshaun Watson at midfield. And I know Pep Hamilton did as well. So interesting, just kind of observations there, things you don't see on the television screen that I, for whatever reason, just because I'm oddly curious, was kind of patiently waiting to see once this game was over.
Deshaun was 12 for 22 overall, 131 yards, 0 touchdowns, 1 interception, quarterback rating 53.4.
Yeah,
so,
I think he finished with a worse quarterback rating than Kyle Allen, believe that or not.
Kyle Allen, 20 for 39, 201 yards, 1 touchdown, an interception, and a fumble. Not near as pretty if you take away the garbage time drive at the end of the game. It sort of skewed the numbers, Shaun.
Yeah, it did. It did. I think he beat him by like 0.1 or something like that. But Deshaun didn't look good today. I mean, he made a couple of, pretty good throws, something that, we shouldn't have been caught off guard by. It kind of played out really just how I thought it was going to, in terms of like the balance between passing and running the football. If you're the Cleveland Browns, there were some drops. Obviously, there were some pressures. Jerry Hughes, Obo Caracuo getting to Deshaun Watson a couple of times, hurrying some throws, sacking him once in this game. I really anticipated a much more accurate and efficient Cleveland Browns offense, though, to be quite honest with you, because in my mind, I broke it down like this. Okay, it was like 583 days from the time that Deshaun Watson last walked off of this football field as a Houston Texan to playing a game of football, although a meaningless one, in the preseason against the Jaguars, I believe it was, earlier this year. That's a long time. I expected him to look rusty, but I also didn't really expect him, and I don't think anybody should have, to look good or playing with any sort of care about him at all because, mind you, that was before the suspension had come down. And once he'd found out that he was going to be suspended for 11 games, okay, now you know a date. You've got a target, and you know exactly who you're playing, where you're playing, and you probably know that team's going to suck anyway. Okay, so then you to me, I would expect like, all right, there was 136 days since he last played an actual game of football. I would expect him to be ready for this one, not really needing to shake that much rust off, even though you can't replicate an NFL pressure or game condition or anything like that in practice, mind you, not even virtual reality, which some of these guys actually use. I just expected him to look a little bit better than he did today. And I'm kind of surprised that the Texans were in this game for as long as they were, because these two teams are operating at both opposite ends of the spectrum here. The Browns are leading the NFL coming into today with the most yards from scrimmage per game. The Texans give up the most yards from scrimmage per game. I expected an absolute blowout, and the final score kind of indicates as such, but we obviously know we didn't see that from a Browns offensive standpoint.
We need you to subscribe, like, and comment on YouTube. We want to hear from you guys. Hit us in the comments because we're going to react to them as we go along. We want you to subscribe. It's a great way to support the show. And Shaun, you talk about the inaccuracy with Deshaun Watson, and it looked like he needed Yuli Gurriel out there because he kept throwing balls in the dirt, and he needed somebody to come and scoop them all up. That's what I thought of when I was watching it.
Let's see. You're talking about the scoop and score?
No. I'm talking about Deshaun needed Yuli Gurriel out there because he threw so many balls. And all the low throws he was making out there. And one of the things I'm curious, because, it's hard to really get a good gauge without being there. I'm sure people are wondering, what did it sound like there with the boos? Like, what was the reaction that you heard from people when he came out, and then with each possession?
There was good boos. It was certainly loud enough, and I'd say they started to wear out as the game went on, because one, the stadium wasn't that packed anyway, and I'm really bad nowadays in trying to give you a really educated guess on the amount of people that are in a stadium that can seat 72,000 people. But I'd have to say that I don't know, there's probably 40,000 people here, and I'd be anxious to see how wrong I am on that. But there wasn't a lot of people here, just as there hadn't been all season long. But the boos were certainly prevalent early in the game. Every time that he broke huddle within, I'd say, the first 5-6 series of the game. In that first offensive series, they huddled up about 4 different times before they actually got going. And so you got plenty of practice, if you were a fan, to boo Deshaun Watson as they approached the line of scrimmage about 3 different instances before the first official snap of this ball game was off for them after the Kyle Allen interception on his first play. But it was there. I don't think it was as bad as people would have liked to have heard and seen, though. This whole week has been kind of funny for me because I've been in the locker room all week long. This was much less to do about Deshaun Watson against players on the Houston Texans. There's 8 guys that were here when he was here. It doesn't matter. Yeah, they don't care. And most of them are friendly with him. It just does not matter. There was nothing there. You weren't going to get any kind of one-liners, any good audio bites from revenge. No, it was... We had nothing to do with this. It's kind of a his thing. And to my knowledge, maybe you can answer this. I talked to a couple of buddies of mine, and they said there was no mention of Busby, no mention of the women during the game, no shot of him in a suite or anything like that. And maybe I think they'd mentioned it before the game, just in terms of like the timeline on Deshaun Watson. So today, it was really about just a bad football team going up against a below average one that has a glimmer of hope in their eye for making the playoffs if they can somehow win 5 of their next 6 ball games and give themselves a chance. But yet still a team in the Browns that does not control their own destiny.
Yeah, unless there was unless I missed something, there was a concerted effort not to mention Busby. The other victims, they obviously mentioned what was going on. They talked about a more contrite Deshaun or a more thoughtful Deshaun that the broadcasters spoke to than the one that you saw at the press conference, which I thought was pretty interesting. How many Browns fans were there? Because, you did hear some cheers when Deshaun came out. Like, what was the percentage, do you think?
I can't remember going back to what game it was. I have to look at the schedule. but fairly early on this season, I'd say probably about maybe the third home game, I noticed the lower bowl mainly being occupied by the visiting team. We saw it plenty for the Eagles game with Jalen Hurts coming back, and there's been a couple of other games where it was really prevalent. I think the Raiders we went there to the Raiders. There was another game or two, but today there's a lot of orange in the lower bowl again, but that's also relative to just the lack of amount of butts in seats here. There just wasn't a lot of people at the game, but I'd say Browns fans probably outnumbered Texan fans in the lower bowl half. I'll say that. So, from that regard, I mean, it wasn't much different than what I've observed all season long. I'll tell you this, though, walking up to the stadium, and I walked the blue lot before the game to meet a couple of friends of mine for about 20, 30 minutes before. I saw quite a few Deshaun Watson jerseys, T-shirts and jerseys, stuff like that from both Browns and Texan fans. And I was paying attention to exactly who was wearing those. I actually saw, and it's a small sample size, just me, one person walking from the purple lot to the blue lot. I actually saw 4 Deshaun Watson jerseys in the Browns uniform. 2 of them were worn by women. All 4 of the ones that I saw from a Texan point of view, all were being worn by men. And I saw 2 of them in particular being interviewed by local TV stations here as I was walking up. So interesting to see why exactly they did not decide to trade those in about a month ago when the Texans held that event.
I don't know if you caught it, but Deshaun went up to Cal McNair, shook his hand, gave him a little. They had a little greeting before the game started.
Yeah, I did not see that. I actually heard about it. I asked Adam Spillane, a colleague of mine, the Sports Radio 610, about that. If there was an interaction, he told me exactly the same thing. I guess I'm not really surprised. Anticipating some sort of gentlemanship, being cordial to each other versus just completely ignoring him. I guess I would have gone with that. What happened, nice gentlemanly handshake, maybe a brief embrace. I don't know. I saw something similar. I mean, I waited around just to see exactly what the interactions were going to be at the end of the game, through my binoculars with Deshaun Watson and a handful of Texan players. I think Laramie Tunsil was one of them, obviously blocking for him here for a couple of years as a member of the Houston Texans. I mentioned, I don't think it was Obo Okoronkwo, but it's certainly Jerry Hughes, and a couple other players that slipped my mind. But Pep Hamilton was an interesting one. Brandon Cooks. Those 2 guys hugged for like 45 seconds. Like, I just thought that was a really interesting embrace right there. I mean, they just couldn't let go of each other. And so there was that. And now it's done. The most highly anticipated home game of the season, I think, grew more and more tired as we led up to it. The week was a giant dud. I think the game was a giant dud because, quite simply, again, it had nothing to do with Deshaun Watson versus the players. This was all from an optics standpoint and from the country as a whole. Most people, literally most people, did not get a chance to see this. And, maybe rightfully so. The NFL trying to make damn sure that it is not a spectacle. And it just so happens to be that who wants to watch, the worst team in the NFL against.
Well, that's the big thing is who the hell wants to watch the Texans? And,
sure.
Of course. Crucial plays in this one, crucial possessions. We're going to go through it a little bit. First play from scrimmage after the opening kickoff. Quintariano makes a near spectacular catch, but because it's the Texans, the ground knocks the ball up in the air for an interception. You can't start out more Texans than that, Sean. And I'm going to go glass half full on this because to me, the most interesting part about that whole thing was, man, Quintariano almost made a great catch. I didn't think he was that good of a receiver as a tight end.
He's good. I'm telling you right now, he's good. I was excited about him early on in training camp before he'd gotten hurt. Really paid very close attention to him. He runs well. He does catch the ball well. Kyle Allen struggled all day long. I thought John McClain probably had the tweet of the day. He wins Twitter today. If you need your Christmas presents airmail, just call Kyle Allen. He'll help you out because he overthrew Nico Collins a number of times today. You mentioned the high ball to Tegan Quintariano. He just struggled with inaccuracies all day long. And it's just, they're throws you don't see from even some really good high school quarterbacks, really good guys in college. And hell, rust. I don't know if Lovie Smith is going to give Kyle Allen much more time to knock off the rust. I had a number of guys leaning over to me today in the press box like, hey, when do you think they go to Davis Mills? And I said, well, does it matter? Does it really, really matter at this point in time? I mean, I think if you're the Texan players, they probably pined for Kyle Allen to get a shot over the course of the last month so much that, hell, you're going to pull him after a couple of games. I mean, what sort of distraction and animosity do you possibly need to internally create and do that? They'll probably give Kyle Allen at least another game or two before they decide to maybe make a move. And I really thought the move was going to be made for him today, to be quite honest with you, Robert, because Kyle Allen took that broadside hit, that block, I think, from Winovich. I think Winovich was a former Michigan Wolverine, if I recall. He knocked a tar out of Kyle Allen on a play. And I thought for sure Allen wasn't getting up from that. That was going to be a concussion. He got up and ended up engineering a pretty decent drive. Can't remember if they actually scored on that one, if it was 3 or they had to punt or whatever. But I just think it's going to be natural if Davis Mills is seen again this year as a quarterback for the Houston Texans. Maybe over the course of the last month, he gets back out there if Kyle Allen is not hurt, just because we see more of this, which I would anticipate, to be quite honest with you, because they don't have very good players offensively to show otherwise, to be quite frank. And the play calling was abhorrent today. I don't use that word very often, but it was despicable, just horrible play calling today to get your quarterback in any kind of rhythm. They go from bootleg to under center to shotgun to running the ball on a 1st and 30, 2nd and long, and then you're inside the 5-yard line, and you're going to
hold on. Don't say anything about the inside the 5. We're going to get to that. I want to get to that.
All right, sorry.
Hold on. You're going to destroy the whole show, and then I'm just going to have to walk away after you're done with answering the question. But yeah, we're going to get to some of the other play calling, but just going back to Kyle Allen for a second. He was 3rd string. I have to go back and look at this, and all of the history behind it. But you remember this? You're a Cougar. He was 3rd string at U of H, and the thing
behind Postma.
Yeah, behind him, and of course behind De'Aaron King. De'Aaron King's not in the NFL right now, and I'm watching Kyle Allen and his athleticism, and I use that word loosely, and just him as a quarterback, and I'm like, De'Aaron King's not in the NFL right now. Isn't De'Aaron King a better quarterback than Kyle Allen?
I guess, I mean, De'Aaron King, from what I remember, yeah, look, he was really good at U of H. Loved watching him play, but he was no Case Keenum. He wasn't no Kevin Cobb. I mean, he was a different kind of quarterback, obviously, and, different team too, but pretty good team actually with U of H whenever De'Aaron King was here. But I don't know if he's a better quarterback. I mean, relative to what you need out of an NFL quarterback, I don't know.
Well, he's better athletically than Kyle Allen. There's no debate about that. Neither guy is big, so that's not a big difference between the two of them. And I'm watching Kyle Allen's arm strength and accuracy, and neither of them looked very good. So I don't know anyway. I'll put that to this. It doesn't matter because nothing's going to happen, but I'm just throwing that out there. The Texans defense stops the Browns for a 3-and-out, but the Texans next offensive possession, Kyle Allen with 2 terrible short passes in short yardage, not even close. So it's 1 first down and punt. The Texans D follows with a big play. Tavier Thomas strips the ball after a reception. Desmond King recovers at the 38. The Browns falling into the usual first half trap, I thought, Sean, of every Texans opponent. They inexplicably decide to throw the ball a lot instead of run the ball with, Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt and all these guys. I just couldn't believe it.
Yeah, I made note here on that offensive possession after the forced fumble by Thomas that was returned by King. Allen missed Tegan Cotoriano, who was wide, open in the end zone, and instead tried to throw that back corner fade to whoever the heck it was. Maybe it was Collins. I don't know. Hopefully it was at least Collins you were looking at. But I mean, Tegan flashed wide open. He had plenty of time, and you could tell he was locked on to whoever I think it had to be Nico in the back right corner of the end zone. Locked on him. That's where the ball was going, no matter what. And I just think it is ridiculous. And that's coached. Hey, we're going to run this play right here. We're going to throw the ball here. Just give him a chance. No. How about How about there's three other guys running routes? How about you go through your reads? Like, find the open receiver. Score the ball.
Are you talking about the possession where he threw the two bad passes and then they punted? Is that the one?
I can't remember. I mean, every possession he threw two crappy passes, but I mean, it was the offensive possession right after the Tavierre Thomas forced fumble. Their third offensive possession. I made note. It was a first.
Okay. Yeah.
Teagan wide open for a touchdown on a 1st and 6 on a first down. They were it was 1st and 16. 2 plays later was a 1st and 30 from their own 36. And I said they suck, you know what? And then that's the same possession they ended up settling for a field goal. Somehow they got back into field goal range, maybe gained a couple of 3 yards to create a 35-yard opportunity there, but I think that's what it was, and they took the lead. But I mean, they're just egregious. Like, that's coach. That is Pep Hamilton saying, throw it to this guy. That's it. That's all you got to do. What if he ain't open? You know, what if you just stink at throwing a back shoulder fade in the corner of the end zone? What about throwing the guy open that runs, you know, a nice 7+2 and nobody's within 4 or 5 yards of him? How about hit that guy?
Yeah, and the reason they got backed up, Brevin Jordan replacing OJ Howard today, finally back into the lineup. He commits a personal foul. Great way to get back on the field. And then Titus Howard, a false start. Titus with 2 penalties in the first 3 drives. He might have had 3 penalties on I mean, not all of them counted against him because of certain situations, and there was declining and stuff like that. But for the record, he was, again, getting a lot of penalties in this game. The Texans, as you said, walk away with the Fairbairn field goal. The Texans D starts to get gashed a little bit on the next possession until Jalen Petrie intercepts Deshaun in the end zone. And let's go with a positive here. It's Petrie's 3rd interception in his rookie season. Sean, it didn't look like Deshaun saw Petrie, but give Petrie credit for a good read and being where he was supposed to be. And Petrie had 16 tackles, 9 solo in this game.
Petrie by far had one of his best games, maybe statistically the best game that he'd had all season long. But you could just see early on in this game, and it was highlighted there by that interception in the end zone. I think he brought it out to actually the 25, 26-yard line, if I recall. He just was playing with more juice, more vigor. You know, he was really laying the wood, man, on his tackles, doing a good job, playing with physicality, strength, confidence. And I asked him in particular about that interception, you know, what he saw during that play. And it was kind of convoluted to me, but he broke the play down perfect. I think he called it like a double post, you know, by the receivers. It was Amari Cooper. And then I forget the other receiver that was running, you know, they were boom, kind of a double post like that. He just sat down. He saw it exactly from the snap. He knew what was happening and he read it beautifully. And that's the kind of play that we saw in the preseason with Petrie. That's the kind of play that we saw from him early on this season. And he's had opportunities, Robert, to intercept the ball a handful of times over the course of really the last 3 games and dropping an easy one, you know, a can of corn just a couple of weeks ago here in a home game. You couldn't have gotten an easier one. And he reads that route tree beautifully, never took his eyes off Deshaun on that play and made a fantastic read, good catch, excellent return, gave the Texans an opportunity, and they needed about 10 more of those today to have a chance of beating this Browns team.
Yeah, and you know, he got all the tackles, but I still saw some times where it's like, man, you've got to use your arms when you tackle. You can't just use the shoulders. This is the NFL, and he does that way too often. He still gets dragged a couple of yards sometimes after plays. But, you know, again, he's got to get in the weight room in the offseason. That's a problem. It's great that you're there, but if you can't get the guy to the ground, doesn't matter a whole lot.
Real quick, before you go on, it just came to mind. I think I might have tweeted this stat out earlier this week, but over the course of the last, I want to say 4 weeks, nobody's been targeted in the red zone more in the Texans secondary than Jalen Petrie. And so you look at that opportunity that he stole away from Deshaun Watson. I just wonder, you know, with 5 games remaining in the season, if, you know, teams continue to test him. I mean, maybe over the course of the next game or 2, we do see that until he proves, hey, don't come in my house anymore because this is what's going to happen. He spoke really highly that he devoted himself. Like, he saw him hit the wall this season in terms of, you know, struggling with tackling and reads and just executing plays. And he made it a point to say that after the game today and said, look, I really redevoted myself and trying to focus on improving. And obviously today it certainly, showed in his play and really in the hard numbers with the tackles and just the plays that he made. It's hard. You're not going to pitch a perfect ball game no matter who you are or what position you play on either side of the ball. It's the NFL. Teams are trying to expose everybody. But he certainly played well enough to give his offense an opportunity to go move the ball and score the ball today. And unfortunately, they just couldn't do it.
Next up, let's get to the Texans' best offensive drive of the day. I'm throwing out the garbage drive at the end of the game. It's 1st and goal at the 3 after they go down the field. But after running successfully the whole drive, Pep calls 2 pass plays, then a run to Dare instead of Dameon Pierce, who is not in the game at all at the 3-yard line for 4 total plays. Then on 4th and 1, they throw the ball to Troy Hairston, of all people. Now you can go off on that entire sequence, Sean.
Okay. In my notes, I said play calling on this drive was horse bleep. Don't give it to your best player on 1st and goal from the 4. Are you bleeping kidding me? Hairston, Jordan both ran flat routes, full speed flat routes on that play that Hairston got.
I think he froze up for a bit. Yeah, there were, I mean, those 2 pass plays, hopefully I'll get you back here in a second. I think we got you again. But yeah, those 2 pass plays to start off with, I'm like, where's Pierce and why isn't he running the ball one of these 2 times? You don't have to run it to him on 1st down, I didn't think, but one of the 2 first or 2nd down, he should have been running the ball. Are you there? Did we lose you? Yeah, I'm going to get back to you. I'll just keep going until I hear you again. But the Texans, after that, the Texans defense with their 3rd huge play in the first half, they tackle Chubb in the end zone for a safety. Desmond King returns the ensuing kick 50 yards to the Browns 48. That's the best punt or kick return of the Texans season, although King would fumble a punt return later in the game. so much for that. The Texans offense with the 3 and out, they just couldn't take advantage of anything. We got you back yet, John? Yeah, it's just I'll keep going and we'll get back to Sean because I know he wants to talk about that possession. Next possession, the Texans allowed, let's see, a couple first downs, but they force a punt. But then the Texans offense follows with a 3 and out. Then the Texans special teams, which has been good all year, gives up a 76-yard punt return to Peoples-Jones. It had been 7.5 years since the Browns scored a touchdown on a punt return. This is just, it's just like, again, it's like Charlie Brown. If something can go wrong with the Texans, something will go wrong with the Texans. So really frustrating. The Texans with a 3rd and 2 at midfield after that with less than 2 minutes, but Kyle Allen fumbles the handoff to Pierce. Allen recovers, but the Texans have to punt. The Texans defense with another big stop. The Texans offense can't do anything with 32 seconds left. So despite the Texans mostly outplaying the Browns in the first half, it's 7-5. Unbelievable. Let's go back, Sean. We got you again.
Can you hear me?
Back. Yeah, go back to what you were talking about with the possession at the 3-yard line.
Yeah, sorry. Internet, by the way, has been very sketchy in the stadium, so I don't think it's your stuff. It's definitely my stuff over here at NRG. But yeah, that play in particular, Brevin Jordan came across at a full speed pre-snap motion. He runs a flat route. Hairston right behind him runs a flat route as well. Horrible play design, really, because it doesn't create any separation with a corner and safety. There's no choice in the matter there. They just both pick those guys up in a one-on-one situation, and it's an easy sit for, I think it was a corner. It could have been the safety. I'd have to go back and really look at the tape. But that defensive back, it's an easy decision for them on who they're going to get. It's just, hey, if he crosses face, you get him. and I got the near guy, which happened to be Hairston there. He catches the ball, but if that is a slower route by Hairston and run more upfield, then that makes it a little bit more difficult for those defensive backs to communicate on who's got who. Brevin's supposed to be coming across fast in full motion. Hairston's not. And I'd be willing to bet, even though that ball was delivered on a dime right where it looked like it was supposed to be, my guess is that Hairston's probably supposed to carry that route a little bit more upfield into space where he's actually catching that ball at that point in time in the end zone. That didn't happen. And again, that just goes back to bad play calling, bad play design. And look, Ben McDaniels, I think, who is the passing game coordinator for this Houston Texans offense, is an easy guy to forget and, can escape criticism because we always want to put things on a head coach or an offensive coordinator. But if you go back and you just look at that play alone, and there was a lot of them today and just really all season long, I think you really see the massive amount of issues this offense really has with some fundamental type things. It looks creative. And hey, there's this window dressing, a pre-snap motion and things like that. They're doing something a little bit different, which, yes, they have used a little bit more of that in the last couple of games. It still has to work. It doesn't matter who the quarterback is at that point in time. They still have to deliver the ball, but it's where they're delivering the ball. Are you creating space in the secondary? Are you making them make decisions? Or are you just kind of like brain dead, mind-numbingly running a route because it says to do so on a piece of paper? They practice these things week in and week out, and maybe their scout team just sucks, or maybe maybe what they think an NFL defense is going to do in this particular situation is completely wrong. It has to be because there's no finesse to what they're doing offensively. They're not executing what looks most of the time like basic high school offensive football. And that's got to be what's most discouraging. And the question was asked today again, Robert, in the postgame press conference. I was not there, but I know the answer. I know the question was asked. Is Lovie Smith going to consider changing play callers going forward? And he said quite simply, no. I don't know if there was a follow-up, but it needs to continue to be pressed and asked until something is changed. And look, does it matter this season? Theoretically, no, but it is affecting the development of your younger players. Like a Troy Hairston, like a Tegan Quatoriano, like a Nico Collins. There are some receivers. You can't tell me that Philip Dorsett is not capable of being used and as effective in this offense as a Brandon Cooks. And I'm talking about in this offense. Is Philip Dorsett as good of a player as Brandon Cooks could be? No. I mean, the guy's checked out, but Philip Dorsett should be, one of the leading receivers on this team, but he's just stuck in a horrible offensive system. And I feel bad for those guys. And I feel bad for the young guys that we need to see progress being made with.
Yeah. Luke asked if Pep was going to get shown the door before or with Lovie. I don't see them making a change before the end of the year. What's the reason?
Yeah, I agree
at this point. So yeah, I think he goes, he's out at the end of the season if Lovie even stays, but I think this is the end for Pep. I just can't imagine it. And, I don't know if you heard me say it, but they were running the ball very well in that drive. And I just didn't understand why Dameon Pierce was not in the game. And I didn't understand you should have run the ball at least one of the two. I don't mind first down, not running the ball, because that's what the other team's expecting. They're expecting the run. But I just thought, but second down, you've got to run because look, it's 4. You should think of that as unless there's a penalty, it's 4 down territory right there. So you've got 4 downs to play with. So run the ball on second down. If it goes nowhere or if Cleveland's starting to bunch the line, then you can do whatever you want to on third down. I don't care. But it just was really baffling to me why they didn't run the ball on the first 2 downs and waited till third down.
My biggest problem is I don't care what down you're really running. Again, you got to be in the moment because the other team is loading up saying the same thing. Okay. And the Texans maybe prove them wrong much of the time because they would anticipate, hey, you're supposed to be doing this here. Well, the idea is to keep the defense guessing altogether. And what the Texans tried to do a couple of times today, and I asked Dameon Pierce about it specifically, not just that this particular instance where they're inside the 5, in the play calling there. But just in general today, I said, hey, because there was a miscommunication on a play earlier in the game where they're running zone read. And I said, hey, you went one way and Allen faked the other way. Was that by design? Because it ended up being a pass play. And sometimes, there's a miscommunication there. Sometimes quarterback's going to make a fake anyway, just to kind of make that linebacker think for a millisecond. And he was like, no, look, we're not a zone read offense to begin with. That was literally his reaction. And then he went on to say there was a miscommunication. I went this way, Allen went that way. And unfortunately, we just couldn't make sense of that. And he said, look, we trust Pep. He's a great offensive mind, yada, yada, yada. Saying what he's supposed to say. And I respect that. Okay. I do respect that. And I understand it. I think we all do. Just at the end of the day, you have to practice these things over and over and over. I mean, we saw the fumble, on the zone read. Allen at least thought he was going to pull it or hung on too long, and Pierce thought he was going to pull it. Like, that tells me it's really a read option, that they're giving Allen the ability to make an actual read and pull it. That's something we didn't even see with Deshaun Watson, that Bill O'Brien allowed Deshaun to do a handful of times, and we saw the same result. There was a fumble, it wasn't clean, and Bill O'Brien never went back to it. And he spent 2018, 2019 never really doing that and fully utilizing that skill set from Deshaun Watson. Well, you can't just practice those things like once or twice in a week and expect it to work on a game day. These things, it's a very difficult finesse and motion to have, because that running back, you're hitting that running back in the chest with the ball and you're holding on to that sucker, and it's a split-second decision. I'm going to pull it or you're going to take it. That is the read. The running back's not reading, the quarterback's reading. And so it just takes time. And that's one of the more frustrating things. And again, I have to put the onus on Pep Hamilton and the play calling in those decisions to run things that you have not done with remote success. There has to be repeatability. In baseball, you have to have a repeatable swing, a repeatable motion, a repeatable delivery, whatever you're doing on a mound or in the box. Basketball, if it's shooting free throws or three-pointers, there has to be a repeatability. In football, there has to be repeatability. And you could easily see, Robert, that there's not repeatability. There's not an emphasis put on doing it until you don't get it wrong type thing. It's doing it until it costs us. And it cost them a couple of times today, and they never went back to it. You can't create any identity no matter who's at quarterback when that's the case.
When you were when we lost you for a second, I was going through some of the rest of the half.
Yeah.
And the biggest play, obviously, for the Texans, besides, we went through that sequence at the goal line, but the biggest play for scoring anyway was the punt return. And I mentioned that had been that 76-yard punt return by Peoples-Jones. It had been 7.5 years since the Browns scored a touchdown on a punt return. 7.5 years. And this special teams has been pretty solid all season long. Now, they had a good play with Desmond King earlier in the game where he gets 50 yards, but that play and then Desmond King fumbling later in the game, it was not good. Wasn't pretty at all for the special teams in this game. And they cost the Texans a couple of times pretty bad.
Yeah, no, it really was those couple of plays, because leading up to the 76-yard return for a touchdown, I mean, look, granted, the game was still fairly young, but look, the Texans punt the ball a lot. And Cam Johnson, pinned the Browns deep a couple of times prior to that, and the Texans took advantage. They got a safety on one of those. And, look, given Deshaun Watson in this Browns run game the longest field possible, you're doing exactly what you wanted to do. I thought the special teams was en route to one of their best performances all season long. And they've been really good all season long. I mean, this is a special teams unit a Super Bowl contending team would love to have, to be quite honest with you. And yeah, look, the punt return for a touchdown, Desmond King fumbling, it was a domino effect. And that was kind of the vibe in the locker room as well. And much of the defensive players were available for comment after this game, and probably by design. The offensive players just kind of wanted to get the heck out of there probably. But the message was like, hey, we should have been able to do more. If the Browns defense is able to score the ball, then we should be too. And we had a couple opportunities today, and we missed a couple of opportunities. Well, when you're playing the best defensive game, and particularly from a run defensive standpoint, that you had all season long against a team and against a duo that you're really supposed to get the brakes blown off of you by, and your offense stinks this bad, and the one facet of the game that you could rely upon to keep you in games and to put you in great position to succeed as special teams is struggling, that's got to be a deflating sensation. And it really was. And a number of players, alluded to that fact. So, I mean, it's just, as Lovie Smith has been unfortunately saying one too many times over the course of the last couple of months in particular, it's tough duty.
All right, let's get to the second half. I kind of sped through the rest of the first half, but second half, the Texans force a punt at midfield. But then with the Texans backed up at the 1, Kyle Allen fumbles a quarterback sneak, which Ward returns for a touchdown. The bad news, Texans strike again. It's not just that the Texans offense sucks, Sean, and can't move the ball. They also hand it back over. I mean, people forget Davis Mills. He led the NFL with 11 interceptions, if you've already forgotten from 2 weeks ago. So this was number 17 as far as turnovers on the season. That particular play, they would get 18 and 19, I think, later in the game with another interception and the Desmond King fumble. I mean, they find a way to shoot themselves in the foot as good as any team I've ever seen. And that's saying something. I've seen a lot of bad Houston NFL teams over the years.
Yeah, and I know this is different and players change, regimes change, but man, when the Texans are bad, when the Texans are bad historically as an organization, and there have been a lot of those years, unfortunately, over the last 22, this is how it happens. Turning the ball over, pick sixes, fumbles, stupid plays. We've seen it. Halfback passes. We already had one of those this year. Thankfully, it didn't go for an interception or anything like that. But Rex Burkhead did actually do that. I think he threw it to Brevin Jordan or Jordan Akins or one of the dang tight ends. I don't know what that was. That was a handful of weeks ago, if you recall that, or if you just wiped it clean from your mind. If you have, congratulations. But this is how it happens. And, that last Allen interception, between him and Davis Mills, they've thrown 11 total interceptions for 7 straight games. Now, I've been called out on Twitter by Ryan Leaf, and I'm going to commit myself to proving him wrong because I do trust my own research. But I tweeted earlier in the game that Ryan Leaf holds the NFL record for most consecutive games with an interception, which, to my knowledge, is 13. Done between the years of 2000 and 2001, which means Davis Mills and Kyle Allen are well on pace to surpass that of one Ryan Leaf, in which I think there was a quarterback named Skelton a couple of years ago for the Arizona Cardinals that rivaled Leaf, and I think he stopped short at 12 games. But me and Leaf are going back and forth on Twitter right now, and I'm going to prove him wrong because Leaf says it was 15 games, and I contend that no, it is. In fact, it was bad, but not that bad. So I got to do some research, but. Yeah, look, when you're talking about historically bad offenses and when just you feel like you can't get any lower, this is how it's done. When you're turning the football over, when you're throwing interceptions, and it's just egregious. And you can be bad without turning the ball over with such regularity and have it be so egregious with the turnovers. I mean, there were some bad balls that he was throwing today.
Yeah, I mean, and then the Texans drive down the field for a field goal, but I want to go back to Pep again because it's 3rd and 5. They're in Browns territory, and he decides to run the ball with Pierce instead of throw it. Pierce is running the ball at 3rd and 5, but you don't run the ball with Dameon Pierce, and you don't have him in the game at 1st, 2nd, and 3rd down and goal from the 3. He's like, what?
Exactly. I mean, we saw this earlier this season within the first month. I don't know if you recall, but I mean, I was standing up on a table and I'm saying, why is your best player? We all knew Dameon Pierce, aside from Brandon Cooks, was their best player on offense. Why do you not have him in high leverage situations in games? And the excuse then was, well, he's not good at blitz pickup. Well, he's not good at pass blocking. Well, we don't want to be predictable. All of those things. And it's like, there is an element of predictability, like even with the Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes, or insert really good quarterback, really good team, really good offense, whatever. There's an element of predictability. They're going to try to get the ball to their best player. Everybody knows that. And granted, the Texans don't have a lot of those really good players, but you got one of them. And you can at least have them on the field and put into the mind of a defense that, you know what? Yeah, here's where the ball's probably going to go. And let's throw a little window dressing, pre-snap motion, spread it out, move things around, create a little bit of a different look. You can look different, but have similar action and execute the same play or do the same thing that you want to get accomplished with Dameon Pierce on the field. And they refuse to do that. And I can't believe that is tolerated time and time again by Lovie Smith, a guy who we do laud at times for, being a veteran NFL coach, a guy that does, understand clock management and handle those types of things well. And he's a good game day manager. Okay, great, fine. But I need somebody better to, kind of put the kibosh on some things that you have to know are egregious during a game.
Well,
make a change.
The game day managing,
Today was bad.
No, and there's been other times where it's bad, and it's like, just the stupid stuff. Like, yeah, the game's over with, whatever. But if you're running a 2-minute offense, run it like you care. Run it like you're trying to come back in the game. Hurry up. That they never hurry up. Then they get to the 5 or 6 yard line, and Kyle Allen can't snap the ball before the 2-minute warning. He's like doing 14 different things, and he doesn't understand that you have to snap the ball because you're wasting a timeout if you're not snapping the ball before the 2-minute warning. I mean, just the little stuff over and over again that this team can't get right. That and it's not like I haven't seen it all in the Bill O'Brien era, but now it just shows up even worse because the team is so bad at this point.
You see some of our comments. Kenneth says, bring the Oilers back. Luke says, so when does Pep get shown the door before or with Lovey? And then Goyo Falcon says, Texans need to clean house. This is unacceptable. Oilers aren't coming back. And the latter two, it's going to happen. The house will be completely cleaned. I mean, I'm telling you, it is just going to be that way. And I'm not saying in Nick Caserio we trust. Okay, remember the old moniker, in Daryl Morey we trust? No, he has not reached that level at all. He's got a long way to go. However, I do trust Nick Caserio to a large degree in that what you're seeing, it's ugly. If you want the number 1 overall pick, it doesn't look pretty en route to get there. Okay, it's going to look bad at times. Okay, and there are going to be plenty of these games. If you thought the Texans were going to play 17 games this season and lose by less than like 7 points or less and be in every single game, and boy, we just, 1 possession here, 2 possessions there, a play here, a play there. No, it's not going to look that way. A bad team is a bad team. It was constructed to be as such, And I really honestly believe that to a certain degree, it's being managed as such, with certain things in mind. I mean, I have to say that because outside of that, it is too egregious to have been allowed otherwise, to be quite honest with you. So I do trust Nick Caserio to clean house, and I do trust Cal McNair, to a certain degree, to not keep one single solitary soul that is wearing a Houston Texans uniform or coach's gear on this staff next year. Besides Frank Ross and anybody that has anything to do with special teams, keep them around, please.
Yeah, and let me just say, if you want the number 1 pick and then you got to play like garbage and you got to coach like garbage and all that, I hate that philosophy, because there are guys, I talk about this with the Rockets, there are guys that are worth keeping around, and if you're keeping them around, I want them to get in the right habits. And if this guy at number one was the LeBron James of the NFL, or whatever, Peyton Manning, or whoever your like surefire number one pick quarterback would be, I mean, that's one thing. But, Bryce Young's not that guy. I don't believe. Nobody thinks he's that guy. So this idea that you're going to just waste the development of some really good, talented guys, whether it's Dameon Pierce or Kenyon Green or Stingley or Petrie or whatever, by them not knowing where to be and how to play, and this is the way we do things, that to me is a concern. I mean, because that takes a while to get that out of out of your players' like minds going forward.
I don't know. I mean, I guess presumably, I know what you're saying. You don't want them to be kind of like scarred going forward, and this being a huge setback year in terms of their individual careers. I mean, I totally get
habits. I'm talking about habits.
Yeah, habits, fine. I get what you're saying, but this is the second, in some cases, third, or maybe even fourth offensive or defensive system that those guys have been in dating back to college. I mean, things change. They have to adapt. And so some of them haven't, been in very different systems over the last couple of 3 years. Some of them are used to something. And, this is a transition into a different league where the pros are. And defensively, look, you'd tolerate a lot of this stuff if you had just an average offense, Robert. Like, who knows what this team would look like with an average offense, with an average quarterback, an average play calling, and like, who knows what we could be talking about here? Fireable offenses, fire Lovey, fire Pep. I don't know. It's been that bad, and at times historically bad and egregious, and elementary mistakes and just simple fundamentals. And the fact that the Texans have a more presidential guy to take the podium in Lovie Smith this year than just that of David Culley last year. No, that's not a reason to give him a pass. That's not a reason to give him another year as a head football coach of this team. They're going to bring a quarterback, and he's not going to be around to oversee the development. It's just not going to be that way, because I stand on this and this alone. One, I'll ask you a question. How often has that happened? And then two, how often has that worked out? Where you've gone quarterback and you've kept a guy around who oversaw absolute horse you-know-what, and it's worked. No, it means multiple different offenses, multiple different systems, multiple different cultures for the supposed franchise quarterback of your organization. Why would you want to give him that kind of a start? If it's CJ Stroud, if it's Bryce Young, if it's Will Levis, if it's anybody, it doesn't matter. If you're spending a number one overall pick on a guy to be your franchise quarterback, you give him a fresh start. You give that head coach and that offensive coordinator and that entire staff the 3-4 years that it's going to take to get this guy to optimum NFL play and to have him perform as such. The reason why you drafted him. Is it going to take 3 or 4 years? I don't know. Does Bryce Young tilt the field for you? Does CJ Stroud tilt the field for you? When those guys walk on the field, are you saying, if you're watching on your TV set, holy smokes, like, these guys are in trouble today? Man, this guy's the best player on the field today by far. If either one of those guys do it for you, then that's who the Texans should take. And I think they do go quarterback. And I think they do go Bryce Young. And you're going to hear all kinds of noise about it, I think, going forward, that, is Bryce Young going to opt to stay? That should he come out because he's going to be long? People say the same crap every year with the best quarterback in the country going to the worst team in the NFL. That's who has the pick. And just so happens the Texans were the laughing stock over the course of the last couple of 3 years in the league. So the optics already are there. And the narrative is already there. But it's got to change. And the only way it's going to change is with a new face. And it's probably going to be Bryce Young. And you've got to do everything in your power. And Nick Caserio has everything at his disposal to do just that. High draft capital, a lot of money to spend. And you've got some good young players on this team that could be a part of the solution more than they are the problem right now going forward. So I do feel good about it, and I think a lot of it is by design. And you just got 5 more weeks where you got to play out just a horrible time in really Houston football history. And 1 year from now, this will be completely, it's going to be like Men in Black, like boom, wiped away from your memory. Because we're going to have Bryce Young on the football field as a Houston Texan throwing dimes to people.
All right, give us something else to talk about in the next 6 months, because you're taking away my Bryce Young stuff already. We got to talk some more Bryce Young down the road and where that's going. But I'm going to end it with this question that we have in the comments, and it's let's go to this one here. Caserio picked up Mills, decided not to bring in a veteran this year to compete with Mills, when last year he preached creating competition at every position. He talks about Mr. Falcone says, or Mrs., I'm not sure, but even the draft class hasn't been all that. The only good rookie we drafted is Pierce. I'm not so sure about that. They said that this is, but here's the question that I wanted to ask you, which is what they've gotten down to, is Caserio. Fire Caserio. It says it's unacceptable that he's hired 2 one-and-done coaches if Levy is fired.
Context matters, man. Context matters. It's not that simple. It's really not that simple. One, you don't even know if Caserio made the decision to hire Cully. 2, you don't know. None of us know. Now, I'm not going to say that there are members of the media that do. They just can't say it, and they haven't said it right now, and they haven't confirmed it, and it'll probably always go unsaid. But you don't even know if what the situation rather was with Lovie Smith, okay? And it's not me trying to be conspiracy theory guy or anything like that, because I'm not that guy. I'm not conspiracy theory guy. I'm just telling you that context matters, and that you have to dig a lot deeper than just say, "Hey, Caserio hired 2 one-and-done coaches."
Easterby.
What about Easterby? Easterby had a lot to do with a lot that you're still seeing on the field. Easterby had a lot to do with the fact that Jeff Driscoll is a quarterback on this Houston Texans team. Easterby had a lot to do with a lot of things that are actually still in place organizationally with this football team that they actually like, and it may not go anywhere for the foreseeable future, that you don't see on Sundays. And in large part, none of that really matters. But in terms of a personnel, like, we don't understand the dynamic that existed to what currently exists to what this season will look like in the offseason.
That's why I'm bringing up Easterby. You're talking about context. Easterby is part of the context.
Yes.
You don't want to talk about it. I'll talk about it. Jack Easterby had his fingerprints all over everything. I assume Jack Easterby had fingerprints on Cully, on Lovie Smith. He was talking to Cal McNair about everything until he left the room. I don't know what Caserio believed on a lot of these decisions. I know Caserio was handling the football decisions and who was getting drafted and all of that, but I don't know about the other stuff. I don't know if he's picking the quarterbacks, but let me just say this about the quarterbacks in competition. To have a quarterback that's a veteran, to be a competitor for Davis Mills, he has to want to come to Houston. He knew that Houston, and everybody knew, and any quarterback out there knew, and everybody in the world knew, that they're trash and they didn't have anything to compete with this year. So if you're a veteran quarterback, do you want to go to the Texans, or do you want to go to anywhere else in the NFL? Right. So, and the other way you can get a quarterback that's a veteran is you can go trade for him. Do you want to waste a draft choice, a mid to late round draft choice, on a quarterback for a team that's going nowhere and who needs all the draft choices going forward that they can have? To me, the quarterback thing, throw that off the table. The coach thing, without me and Sean being in the room and to know what Easterby was doing with Cully and with the Lovie Smith decision, it is almost impossible to say. I can't judge Caserio about anything as far as that goes until we move forward into next year, like who he picks as the head coach, who he picks going forward. Because now I believe he's making those decisions. Before, I didn't know.
Yeah. And I think he was a victim of circumstance. And I think he's going to have a full deck to play with now going forward, which is why I want to give him the benefit of the doubt. Because we just don't know the power struggle and the structure that existed to what extent over the course of the last 2 years within this organization. You could speculate a lot. You can even connect some dots, which I feel like, Robert, you did a pretty good job of there. And I think you're spot on in relation to Cully and Smith and the Easterby connection. But there are so many more questions that need answers, and we probably will never have any answers to those questions.
What we do know, though, is Easterby got into the room because of Bill O'Brien.
Yeah.
And Caserio got into the room because of Easterby. So if Caserio went against Easterby, he knew his job was in jeopardy, because then Easterby would go to Cal McNair and get him out of there. So Caserio went along with it. I mean, if this is like a Shakespeare play. If I know that the guys could stab me in the back, then I got to watch my back on that guy, and I got to do what he says and work my way around it. And I don't think Caserio was the one that eventually got Easterby out of there. My guess is somebody outside of Caserio went to Cal McNair and said, you know what? The optics on this are terrible. Yeah. Like, Caserio was not that guy, because Caserio knew he got a job. Not only did he get a job, he got a guaranteed long-term contract for a franchise that was in the total crapper because of Jack Easterby. So that's the point here. I think you've got to remember the circumstances. The circumstances are important.
Yeah, I think it could be both, though, to be quite honest with you. Because, look, Nick Caserio's name didn't pop up on that search committee when they were charged with finding prospective general managers. Easterby found that guy, had a connection with that guy, and the New England connection in general, it existed. So if you're Nick Caserio, sure, why wouldn't you take advantage of an opportunity to go be a general manager of an organization in which your buddy is already a member of? And once you're given the opportunity to show what you can do, I don't think it's out of the question that Caserio could have played a part. To what degree, I don't know. But in getting Easterby, at least his power, as much as he did, removed, whether he totally was responsible for having him ousted as a member of this executive staff, I don't know. But I think he certainly probably played a small part of it. And
my guess is Caserio wanted Brian Flores because he knew Brian Flores from his days with the Patriots. Maybe, yeah. And when that thing blew up, then they were left holding the bag, because here's what happened. They were counting on the Brian Flores thing. Then Brian Flores decides he's going to sue the NFL. So where are the Texans at that point? They're at the point where all of these coaching candidates that were out there are all gone. And remember, who's ever out there, all these great guys that the Texans could have hired, could they have, though? Did these guys really want to come to Houston instead of the other franchises? Wouldn't you have picked any other franchise in the NFL if you had a choice as a head coach than Houston? So I don't know who they could have hired as a head coach if they didn't, hire Brian Flores. And definitely by the time Levy comes around, when it gets to that point, all those guys they're off the table because they've already been hired by other places. You have to remember the timeline of all this and how this whole thing played out. And look, Brian Flores, there might have been problems with him in Miami, but he had done a pretty good job with, making that team look pretty good. You can say, oh, Tua looks a lot better, and that's a whole other situation. But as far as the team itself and how they were playing, he had done a pretty decent job with Miami. And there was the issue was with him and management there.
Yeah, and you can't argue with the improvement that you did see with him at the helm in Miami. However, what's on the tea leaves now and reading between the lines with things that Mike McDaniels has said this year, with things that Tua has said that draw allusions to what things and culture was like under Flores while his time in Miami. I'm kind of glad that didn't transpire and happen here, despite, what it kind of led to. I think there's light at the end of the tunnel. I think this is a desirable job, and I think there's going to be, plenty of candidates to choose from, to be quite honest with you, because you got the number one pick. You're probably going to have two in the top 10, depending on how the Browns finish. You're going to have two really good first-round draft picks, a lot of draft capital, a lot of money to spend. You've got a lot of pieces on this team already. Not that many, but you've got an entire offseason to try and build a squad. So it's got to be very appealing to a prospective head coach, whether it be a first-year guy or somebody else making a lateral move that maybe this is a better fit for. I don't know. We got a lot of time. We got 5 months before the draft. A lot of things can happen, and they will. conversation on the quarterback, though, and what the Texans are going to do with the number 1 overall, I don't think is going to change very much. I think it's pretty set in stone. And I know there's people out there. We're getting a lot of comments now on Bryson going to be the number 1. Texans. Somebody's saying Texans need to draft a tight end, like number 1 tight end. Get out of here. You know what I'm saying? Like, not going to happen. It's not going to happen. You're going to get a quarterback, and there's going to be talk. I can't wait to see what apex it reaches of, hey, let's just wait for Caleb Williams. Everything's going to be fine. Okay. If you thought this was an orchestrated tank this year to get the number 1 overall pick and it looks this bad, how bad do you think it has to look to do the same damn thing next year? From an optics standpoint, what better staff would you want to tank next year in 2023 for than the one you got in-house already? Try selling that to the fans in this city and in the surrounding area of the Houston Texans. It's not going to happen. You had a plan. This is Caserio's plan. Got draft capital, you got money to spend. You're going to take the best possible player out there, number 1 overall, and it's probably going to be Bryce Young. If it's CJ Stroud, fine. I don't know. I'm not saying it's Bryce or nobody else. I'm just saying it could be Bryce, it could be CJ, whoever. They're taking a quarterback, and with that quarterback, you're going to have an entirely new coaching staff and face of a franchise next year. And this thing then, and only then, will start to take a real turn.
Okay. Well, you heard it. Sean's predicting a total clean house except for Caserio. So we'll see what happens with all of that. I want to talk more about the quarterback situation, but give me a few more weeks to square some things out.
You got a long time.
I did figure I would be talking quarterbacks here, and it's, I thought it was a possibility a few months ago, but that the whole conversation was, but definitely if you haven't, go check out. I did a conversation just 3 or 4 weeks ago. We talked about Bryce Young with the draft expert. It's worth a listen. Just go type in Bryce Young in our search engine, and you will find in the YouTube search engine for the page, and you will find that conversation, which was really interesting. And
hey, let me give Falcon credit here. He says a tight end in the 2nd or 3rd round, genius, not in the 1st round. Okay. All right. Well, you certainly wouldn't do it in the 1st round. So 2nd or 3rd round, yeah, maybe.
Well, they've drafted a tight end in the 2nd or 3rd round for like 5 of the last 6 seasons, and it's always a failure. I'm like, forget the tight end at this point. You know what tight end is for me on the list of Texans issues? It's like 21st.
Yeah,
they need a center. They need guards. They need everybody on the front 7, any position. There's 7 positions on the front 7. They can
younger edge rushers,
like
give me
all
another
of that.
wide receiver. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like, they've got needs all over the place, and tight end is not one of them. Even though, yes, they have technically, I think, the worst tight end group production-wise in the entire league, but I think a good quarterback and a good offense in here, you could probably do just fine with an O.J. Howard or Jordan Akins or even a Tegan Catoriano or even a Brevin Jordan. Any one of these guys that has played a snap this year from that tight end room this season, you could probably be okay with. You got a lot of other problems to solve before you even get to tight end. I agree with you there.
Yeah, the other part about it is, what are these tight ends going to look like with a real quarterback? Just think about it for a second.
Yeah, that's my point. Yeah,
they can't throw the ball and catch the ball themselves. And so, and by the way, and a real offensive coordinator. So if you think the tight end is the issue, then you think Pep Hamilton and Davis Mills and Kyle Allen are just all brilliant and fantastic and are doing exactly what they're supposed to do. So look, I mean, like Nico Collins, and I said this on Twitter today, and I'll repeat it here. Nico Collins is better than you think he is after watching these quarterbacks. And I'm actually very happy with Nico Collins. I think that's going to be the best pick by far of that first Caserio draft. And really, there's not a whole lot of selection in that draft anyway, but that's going to be the one that sticks from that entire draft. Brevin Jordan, obviously, Roy Lopez, Davis Mills, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, Sean and I will do this again in the middle of the week, talking Texans and anything else that's going on in Houston sports. But we're going to continue to have these conversations, and I'll get my thoughts collected a little bit on the quarterback situation, because I have thoughts just in general with the quarterback situation. And as it goes along, we'll get into the specifics of the quarterbacks that are out there. But I would rather leave a lot of that to the draft experts, because I don't feel like I'm good enough. I don't feel like the draft experts are good enough sometimes to judge the quarterback, but certainly
they're not. If they could talk about it, you and I are more than well enough qualified to talk about it as well. And we've got 5 months to do so. So we need to have a quarterback show quarterback-centric show, maybe one every week leading up into the draft, April 27th, 2023. Let's go.
Yeah, we're going to have some more quarterback experts for sure. But great to talk with you, Shaun. Make sure, if you haven't, to go subscribe to our YouTube channel if you're on us right now, as well as, subscribe to us on whatever your favorite podcast app is, because we also do this audio wise. So if you can't watch us on YouTube, when you're in the car, when you're at the gym, when you're walking the dog, whatever, listen to our shows. We'd love to get more input from people out there that are listening and watching. And thank you again for everybody out there for being on with us. That's all for the Houston Texans. Another ugly Houston Texans post-game show, but Texans lose this one to the Browns, and Deshaun gets his revenge. Sort of, not really. But anyway, we'll catch up with everybody.
Revenge.
Yeah, we'll catch up with everybody later. Thanks.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Hey, you can support the show by subscribing on YouTube and commenting on the videos. Listen to Houston Sports Talk on Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, and Google. Don't forget to tell a friend and share our show on social media. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.